Year one expectations for Matt Rhule. What are you expecting out of Nebraska entering year one of the Matt Rhule era? Now, looking at this team overall as a whole, I don't think they're all that talented. Honestly, I don't think Matt Rhule is going into a situation where he just has all the talent to have a Brian Kelly kind of first season. You got to remember that Brian Kelly, even though he had a successful first year at LSU, he hit the transfer portal really hard. Matt Rhule didn't really hit the portal with that level of intensity. They utilized the transfer portal, but they didn't have a drastic influx of transfers coming in. And when I look at this defensive line really concerns me. They're expected to be starting two true freshmen on the defensive line, and their linebacker unit is really good. Their secondary is solid. They got a couple of good players in the back end. But overall, this is a team that has a lot of improvement that has to be made. I think at best they could potentially end up winning 7 games, maybe 8, due to how good and dynamic they can be on offense with Jeff Sims at quarterback. Jeff Sims, if you guys didn't watch him play at Georgia Tech, go watch some highlights. This dude was a really good player. Not great, but a really good player who was kind of held back in a bad situation in a toxic environment. Nebraska has a solid group of wide receivers, a better group of wide receivers than what you may think. Their running back unit is also really good. And if you're a Cornhuskers fan, something that should have you really optimistic this season is that your rushing attack should be way better than what it was last season. With having Jeff Sims back there and the talent that you got back there at running back, that should automatically make you one of the best rushing teams in the Big Ten, because you're going to have the rushing ability of Jeff Sims plus 2 other talented backs in the backfield. Wide receiver, you're solid there. So I think offensively, when you look at how this offensive line is expected to play, Nebraska's offensive line hasn't played at a good level for the last couple of years, but the coaching staff over the course of the spring, they've said that this offensive line has made gradual improvements, and this offensive line should be improved slightly this season. At least that's what the overall tone sounds like to me when it comes to reading and hearing comments from the coaching staff about the performance that they are expecting to get from their offensive line this year. I really think when you look at Jeff Sims, the fact that he's able to make something out of nothing, he has a lot of athleticism. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of Sandalwood, and he was a big get for Georgia Tech. They were really excited about him, and he had some really good moments. And you remember what Matt Rhule did with Jerry Bohannon. There are people who push back against me on this, but Jerry Bohannon, I don't think he was dirt. With Matt Rhule there, I think he was pretty solid, and I think Matt Rhule got the most out of Jerry Bohannon, at least when he was the head coach there. You look at Jeff Sims, this is somebody that still has a good amount of development that needs to be made, but he has way more upside than Jerry Bohannon. He's a way better athlete and has a way stronger arm. And Jeff Sims was Georgia Tech's best player at times when he was playing last season. So when I'm looking at Nebraska, I think with Jeff Sims at quarterback, I think he makes them very intriguing. If they didn't have him at quarterback and they had somebody else that didn't really have the kind of dynamic running ability he possesses, I don't think I feel the same way about them. And Nebraska under Scott Frost, they went through some pretty rough patches. Their offensive line was dreadful under him, and they weren't really all that great offensively. They finally got competent quarterback play out of Casey Thompson last year. And Casey Thompson wasn't even bad. He was pretty good. And when you're looking at Jeff Sims, I think you're getting somebody who has the capability of being one of those players that can elevate your team. Similar to what Jaden Daniels did last season with LSU. He was carrying LSU on his back. Honestly, when you think of LSU football, outside of Brian Kelly, you were thinking about Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels had some really great performances. Some Heisman-worthy performances, I should add. And it was a pretty good bounce-back story. And the same thing could happen with Jeff Sims and Matt Rhule. Matt Rhule is looking for redemption. Had a lot of success in the Big 12 at Baylor, leaves the college ranks for the NFL, doesn't work out, makes a big return to college football at a program that has a lot of history of being successful but has been down. Matt Rhule could be the savior of Nebraska. And Jeff Sims is looking for a second opportunity after it not working out at Georgia Tech, a team that had a lot of promise at one point. So I think that Nebraska, best case scenario, I think they end up winning 8 games. I think that 8 wins is realistic. You know, early in the season, you're going to be playing Colorado. I think that's going to be a really intriguing matchup because you got 2 programs that they don't really know where they're at from, you know, how good they truly are in terms of being able to compete in their conference. You know, you got teams that are hopeful that they can compete, but realistically, at best, they're going to be middle of the pack teams. And for schools like Colorado, Nebraska, both having new coaching staffs, having concerns at a good amount of positions, this is going to be a good test for Nebraska to see where they stand. Now, you got to play Illinois. I think Illinois is going to be a really tough game, but you're going to have an opportunity to win that game, although you're not as talented as Illinois up front. With their playing style and how they play football, they're one of those grinded out, hard-nosed football teams. They want to take a lot of time off the clock. So that means that offensively, you can't afford turnovers. You can't afford a lot of mistakes. So I think that's a winnable game for them if they're able to not get gashed and ran down to the ground. Obviously, you should be able to beat Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech. And even before you play Colorado, you're going to open your season on the road against Minnesota. So this schedule isn't the easiest for Nebraska. After they play Illinois, you got Northwestern. That game could go either way. Purdue has a new coach. You probably should be able to win that game. You probably should be able to beat Northwestern. I said that could go either way. You can beat Northwestern. Michigan State, Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa, you got to close your season off with, and those games can go either way also. It's like when you look at Nebraska's schedule, I don't really think there's any team that I look at this year and say, oh, they got no chance at being able to beat them outside of maybe Minnesota, Michigan, and Maryland. That's about it. I think that every game on Nebraska's schedule is winnable. Now, they probably aren't favorites to win most of these games. They probably won't be favorites going into most of these games. But they do have the capability of being one of those teams that kind of surprises people. They're a good, feel-good story. They get to a bowl game. I at least think that this team is capable of being able to make it to a bowl game with how good Jeff Sims is. And this is a really good wide receiver room. Not great, good wide receiver room. I think this offensive line will improve a little bit. It's not going to be overwhelmingly great, but it's going to be better considering what you've gotten from that position over the last couple of years. So my first year expectations for Matt Rhule is that I expect him to make Nebraska a respectable program again in his first season. They're going to be a team that you're no longer going to look on your schedule if you're one of their opponents and say, oh, we play Nebraska, easy win. Nebraska, even though they may not win a whole bunch of one possession games, they're going to be in a bunch of them. They're going to be a team that's going to be tough. They're not going to be a team that you're just easily going to beat unless you just have an overall better team than them, like Michigan. So I think year one, Matt Rhule can end up winning 6 games at Nebraska. I'm a really big fan of Jeff Sims. I am a little biased when it comes to him because he's from Duval. You guys already know we got to support our Duval brethren. But you look at Jeff Sims at QB, what they have on offense. I'm not sold on their defense a whole lot. They do have talent on the back end of their secondary. Their linebacker unit is really good, but their defensive line, I don't think is that great. But we'll see how that side of the ball performs. I think that there's a recipe for Nebraska to at least get to a bowl game this year. And I think that would be considerable improvement considering the fact that this is a program that's had some really dark times. You weren't even able to get to a bowl game with Scott Frost, so that would be monumental growth. If you're a Nebraska fan, you'll take that in a heartbeat.